So again, as a step towards honoring the truth and achieving healing and reconciliation, Campus Compact seeks to acknowledge the traditional native lands on which we stand. Given that we are gathering for today's webinar from across the country and some from around the world, we invite you to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Native people where you're joining us from. You can do so in the chat. I myself am participating from Chicago, which is located on the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes such as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox also call this area home. The region has long been a center for Indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. Today, one of the largest urban American Indian communities in the United States resides in Chicago. Members of this community continue to contribute to the life of this city and to celebrate their heritage, practice traditions, and care for the land and waterways. We also want to recognize and stand in solidarity with those individuals who are continuing to call for racial justice and equitable communities and affirm that Black Lives Matter. And we commit to move beyond words into programs and actions that fully embody a commitment to full participation and equity. So we're so happy that you all could be part of our first webinar for Fusion. And today's webinar is titled Reimagining Engagement and Partnership During Virtual CEL. And I'll be presenting our presenters shortly. I just have a couple of announcements. First, our applications are open for the second round of the Engaged Scholars Initiative, or ESI. ESI is geared towards early career community engagement professionals and tenure and pre-tenure faculty. And it's an equity and leadership development program that seeks to develop the next generation of community engagement champions on campuses across the United States. Applications are due on March 26th, and I'll put a link to the information in the chat in a little bit. And you can also find more information about ESI on our compact.org website. I also want to announce that we just put forth our current cohort of the Newman Civic Fellows. So check out our website, compact.org, to see the amazing young people who were selected by their universities for their commitment and engagement with the community. So I'd like to now introduce Dr. Lynn Donahue. Dr. Donahue is the Assistant Director of the Institute for Civic and Community Engagement at St. John Fisher College, and founding director of the college's Community Engaged Learning Program. Under Donahue's leadership, SJFC offers community engaged learning to students in all disciplines. Dr. Donahue provides faculty, students, and community partner training, mentoring, assessment, and recognition. She is published author and presenter on pedagogy, assessment, and community partnerships. Lynn Donahue is also the recipient of the local and national grants and the college's Cardinal Award. She received her EDD from the University of Rochester, her MED from the University of Buffalo, and her BA from Skidmore College. And she is a veteran to presenting with Campus Compact, and so we're so excited to have her back today. So Dr. Donahue, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you enable me to share my screen? Thank you. So thank you very much for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here and presenting this webinar today. Marisol has introduced me, so I'm going to introduce the college a little bit before we get into the program. And so St. John Fisher College is a liberal arts college with undergraduate enrollment of about 2,500, and we have graduate programs as well in all of our 5 schools: arts and sciences, business, education, nursing, and pharmacy. And community engaged learning, we used to call it service learning, is in all the schools and almost all majors. The setting is suburban within an upper class neighborhood. City of Rochester is about 200,000 and it has the highest child poverty rate of cities its size, number 3rd in the country for all major cities. So there is quite a disparity, just almost 5 minutes away from the campus, between campus and the city. Community engaged learning works with about 50 community partners, about 20 to 25 courses per semester to meet goals related to healthcare, education, aging, sustainability, poverty, and economic development. So I wanted to talk a little bit about criteria for community engaged learning. because even though this is called Reimagining Partnerships and Engagement for Virtual CEL, the principles are really similar and have not changed in terms of the foundation of what we do, whether it's virtual or non-virtual. So that's one of the lessons from this year. So we have three principles: meaningful engagement, so the collaboration between the college and the community. So we want to make sure that any work we do fully adds value to the community organization that we identify before the semester begins. The second part is the meaningful learning part. So this is always in academic courses and is carefully constructed so that the course goals can be met through the assignment, the experience in the community. And then the third part is the meaningful implementation. So faculty integrate assignments and reflections to make sure there's connections between the experience and the content and vice versa. We also follow principles of mutual benefit and reciprocity, and that's really important, especially when we talk about remote CEL. So we use a strength-based approach to build on the assets and capacities of those we serve, and we do that by hearing the voices from the community. And so, like I said, before the semester even begins, we meet with a community partner and we don't make any decisions on what the project will be and the partnership will be until we are working side by side with the community to understand their perspectives and needs, and to acknowledge that they have the expertise on the problem and often the solutions. And so when we translate that into the project work and orient students, we want to communicate to them that we're leading with a philosophy of collaboration with versus service to the community, to avoid that charity focus and to avoid a power imbalance. So that's really important. And so just as an example to illustrate, and this was a direct service experience this past semester and the fall as well. The pictures, by the way, are all from last year. So for context, St. John Fisher was on the ground. The students were on campus, about 75% of the courses, except for a point in the fall where we had to pull everybody, but everyone's back now. CEL, though, is all virtual, and so we did not allow students to be on site or in the community in any of the cases. So everything was done virtual. Capacity building was one kind, direct service is the second. So Seeds of Success is this resiliency teaching program, and we partnered with one of the city schools, and they had identified social emotional learning as being a priority for them. They don't get enough of that, and meaningful relationships with college-going students. In terms of the learning, the students were from a variety of courses, a child development course and philosophy of education. So they learned and applied those theories as well as social justice issues. And then there was writing and academic assignments to link the two together. Two other examples of capacity building that happened this year, again, virtual using Zoom and online meetings and conversations with partners and breakout rooms, was a media research and analytics, analyzing the data analytics on websites for nonprofits, and then an advanced statistics course, conducting statistical data analysis for Ontario Youth County Court. Okay, so I'm going to have a little bit of a dialogue and participation from you as we go through this presentation. And so the first question for you is that there have been challenges. I presented and gave you an overview that, like I said, doesn't look extremely different from regular on the ground community engaged learning, but certainly there were quite a few challenges. But what I want to focus on is this reimagining part. What has been surprisingly successful about community engaged learning or service learning this semester and last fall semester? What has been surprisingly beneficial and successful of CEL, even though much of it or all of it was virtual? So if you wouldn't mind going into the chat and sharing your responses. And Marisol, I think you have control of the chat. I can't see it. So perhaps you can read out some of the responses. Can you read out a few of the responses?
We don't have anything in the chat yet.
Oh, okay.
Folks are probably typing.
Give me one more minute.
Mhm. Can you talk a little bit about, I can ask a question based on what I've heard from folks in the field, the differences between like when it first happened and how you scrambled to sort of get everything together versus maybe in the fall semester when you had kind of that dry run of spring semester.
Well, the college closed in March, meaning that the students were asked to leave. Many of the staff, including myself, worked from home. The semester continued, but there definitely was a big scramble to convert everything to online, although faculty had been a little pre-warned that this might happen, but certainly just a couple of weeks. The college did close for a full week, I think, with no classes. Maybe there was 2 weeks. And so in terms of CEL, we ended up having to really scramble with our projects. Now, the ones that were capacity building that just really involve a few meetings in the middle of the semester were able to switch to Zoom. And again, there was some technical learning curve there, but most of those students were able to finish out those projects as graded assignments for the class and able to hand something to the community partner. So we were able to make that work with some really quick support and good support from our campus IT folks. And then our direct service, several of those we did cancel and had to stop midstream because we didn't have the ability to figure out how to switch those experiences to Zoom. And we were not allowed to go into the community. And most of the students, I mean, we have a fair number of local students, but many students who don't live in the area. And so, so that was unfortunate for some of those. And then in the fall, we had less than usual because we were still able to continue much of what we do. But we work with comfort care homes, for example, and palliative care. Those were all closed. Many of the nursing clinical students were not able to continue. And some faculty just felt like this is too much, like I have too much to deal with, so I'm going to cancel my experience. But I had about 75% still continue. And then in the spring, it was back to full capacity. And so I think, like I'm going to talk more about, and I think I'll just keep on going unless
we do have a couple of questions and statements.
Okay. So I'm going to talk in this presentation a lot about some of those details.
Great. So Kelly writes, student engagement with us and with each other when reflecting on their experiences in terms of success. And then Ryan asks, what additional support have you needed to provide to community partners who may not be able to adapt to an online world so quickly?
Okay, thank you for that question. If there's any other questions, please add it in the chat and I'd be happy to address as we go along. And so embedded in this list of what has been surprisingly successful is sort of the challenges. So we found that even though community partners were really tapped in their ability to meet their own needs at the community, even though some staff were not able to supervise students because they were so stretched, we found that we were still able to work with many of the community partners. And I'll explain more why. And we were still able to give support, and the outcomes were still surprisingly positive based on the assessment results, which was a surprise. I thought it would be more challenging in terms of outcomes. Flexibility, it offered flexible times for service because of the not needing to be in a car and transport. We could involve more freshmen. We were able to work from home, even though that was a personal challenge for many people. Engagement, it can increase connection to hard to reach communities, which happened some, and we were still able to engage online, but certainly I'll talk more about that. And then there was some new skill acquisition in terms of learning about Zoom and other tools that we were provided support for. So now I'm going to go into these 4 Ps of reimagining partnerships and engagement, the crux of the presentation. Marisol, can you repeat that question to make sure that I have that in my mind?
So Ryan asked, what additional support have you needed to provide to community partners who may not be able to adapt so quickly to online? And then Muriel asks, Muriel's from Campinas, Brazil. Here we live in very difficult times. We canceled engagement actions. Some professors created podcasts, other online videos, but the question, I wonder how effective is that when communities do not have access to internet? Now we created a call for remote community engagement to finance community engagement projects. Here goes question number 2. What is remote community engagement?
Okay. So I had given you an example, and I can include another example, but just to really clarify, remote community engaged learning, community engagement for us meant that 75% of the classes, students were on site taking classes with the professor using lots of social distancing, masks and cleaning and all the rest. The other 25% were online. All students were allowed the option of taking their class online. So no students were forced to come onto campus if they weren't comfortable, if they were feeling sick. So the professor would be standing with a screen with the online students on the screen and the other students in the classroom. Like I said, some classes were all online. And so that, of course, the professor was at home or in their office online. And so our capacity building projects where students connect with a partner at the beginning for an orientation, 1 or 2 or 3 times in the middle to receive feedback on this product. And then at the end to be able to hand over the project or give a presentation. That all was done through Zoom. Even if they were on site in their classroom, they would talk to the person on the screen, or they would be on their computer in a breakout room, talking and having a meeting like we are right now. For the direct service, I gave an example where these students used a curriculum, read books, led activities on social emotional learning to kids at their homes. And the teacher generated the Zoom link. The students popped onto the Zoom link, were put in breakout rooms and ran these book reading and activities to the kids for about 45 minutes once a week. And that was really effective. And of course, harder to engage with kids, but it still worked. I observed and I would pop in from time to time to see that in action. So let me kind of talk about some of these strategies and then and with partnering, and then I'm happy to be, to really address individual questions. So the first piece of the 4 Ps is preparation. And so it's really important to ascertain the strengths and needs of the community partner. And so I used a interest survey in addition to individual phone calls and meetings to debrief and talk about community needs, as well as our assessment at the end. We always ask partners, what else would you have a need for? So there's a variety of information, but I wanted to share this with you. I send this to all of our community partners, about 50, and this has 3 different categories. This is only for capacity building. And this is in line with the resources that we can provide in the courses that rotate and have CEL in them. And so you can see in business services, we offer promotion plans, access database, human resource analysis. And then the second is communication. We can offer websites, curriculum, brochures. And then the last is research. We can offer literature reviews, surveying, data analysis. Again, not every semester. So then I also include some of the courses that are going to be coming up for the semester. And so this is for the spring semester. This is the survey I use for this semester. And so I asked the partners to indicate what they want But I also ask about technology. So that's really important. Do you have the technology needs to support community engaged learning, specifically through Zoom, but it could be other tools. So I ask them to indicate the tools. I also ask them, can they support the students? Like I said, we have a minimum of 3 times a semester that they need to be available to talk to the students. They need to return emails within 48 hours because of the academic deadlines. They may need to introduce students to children or youth or seniors. And so we clarify that and who is the contact person. Did you see all that? Marisol? Was that visible, that questionnaire? No. Okay. I apologize.
We just see the PowerPoint, not the questionnaire.
Okay. Now, do you see it?
No.
Okay.
You may have to click the link again.
Well, it's up on my end.
Oh, you probably have to share a different screen.
Challenges of technology, right? Now, do you see it? Oops. Oh boy. I went through the whole survey. I apologize.
Now it's up.
Okay, great. Okay, so I was talking through this. Yeah, unfortunately, I already went through the other pages. So, okay, well, anyways, I'm not going to be able to show that to you. But what I can do is I can put, oh, actually, Marisol, you can put the link in the chat if you don't mind. And then people can look at it on their own. So like I have already said, we found that capacity building can continue, some direct service can continue, others were put on hold, like palliative care and some after school programs where we were not able to coordinate with and have a central person to coordinate Zoom links with kids at home. Questions to ask to be really clear at the outset is, what is the biggest obstacles your organization faces given current events? How can we support you? Some of the ones that are in the survey about technology support and student support, and then how have daily operations changed? And so those are, I think, important questions to be clear on. All throughout this process, I also like to communicate with partners that we prioritize a relationship with the community partner. I'm trying to find partners to fit with different courses based on faculty interests. But I always want to put the priority on the relationship with the community partner, as I do in non-COVID times. So it's always about the right fit with the right people at the right time and adding significant value. And if that doesn't happen, then we certainly don't want a partner to be able to preserve that relationship, and also to make sure that we don't tap the resources of that partner. So I also would like to confirm the value of the project. So the most successful projects are ones that add real value, where there's a need that can't be met because of lack of time, people, or knowledge. It's not supposed to be an add-on project. It's not supposed to be something that I guess is insignificant or just out of curiosity. And then, of course, like I already said, request information on access to technology, and then acknowledge the need to be flexible. Of course, that's true with all CEL, but especially during this time period. There are stops and starts. There are things that come up, but there are additional challenges. So that's important for everybody who's participating to acknowledge that. The other piece I think is interesting to consider is ascertain the strengths and needs of faculty and students in this process. Again, we talk about this being a collaboration, not just us doing to others. And so something that could be helpful for you is thinking about what you bring to the table and what the students bring to the table, even assigning roles or having them choose roles, because it can be helpful beyond the academic skill set and discipline that they're bringing to this work. Also, what are some of the other strengths that they have that they can tap into to be successful? And so some of these things here I think are interesting to think about. I'll pose this as a question to you to consider. Do you feel like your strengths are being a coordinator, coordinating the information, the process necessary for a smooth implementation? One of the things I'll talk about that we use is a project management approach. Now, most faculty are not used to that kind of approach in an academic classroom, but it's really necessary to be really organized in this process. Are you a champion? Can you rally around the partnership and champion the work of others? Or are your students? Who's a champion among your students? Communicator, can serve as a reliable and consistent communicator. Again, the same as non-COVID time, you should have one communicator in a student group to communicate with your community partner for scheduling and for main questions so that they're not getting bombarded by multiple students. Are you a grader? What?
Sorry to interrupt. We are not seeing your PowerPoint, if that's what you're sharing.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I sent a message in the chat, but yeah, we're not seeing the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. I do other presentations. So I'm used to stopping share and starting share again. For some reason, I thought this was going to be different. Can you see it now? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we talked about coordinator, champion, communicator, creator. Who in your student group are you a thinking outside the box kind of person? Can you consider innovative ways to accomplish the project goals? Who is a convener, connecting with your resources, finding out who has the resources you need and obtaining them? And then a caregiver, somebody who really does well teaching, mentoring, healing others. And so these are strengths that you can bring to the process, your students can bring to the process. And so again, I encourage you to put into the chat just to think for just about a minute, which of these strengths do you bring to the community engaged learning? Put one or two of these in the chat box. Are you a coordinator, a champion, a communicator, a creator, a convener, a caregiver?
We have champion and creator for one. Convener.
I think these are useful for any group work, for any committee work that you do. And then you can think about applying this to your community partners, maybe even having a conversation with them if you're going to really deepen the partnership work, or just even as sort of an analysis. I think our partners bring different skill sets, and we kind of have to work with the strengths that they offer, and then consider if maybe the coordination and organization is less than we'd like, helping with that process. Or if maybe the communication piece. So I think this can be a really valuable tool. So the second P is process. And so like I mentioned, using an organized process for this is really important in any community engaged learning, but especially during virtual, because there are so many other moving parts to keep track of, and it can be easy to be overwhelmed if things aren't coordinated and well thought out. And so what I think I'm going to do is I have a couple of things to share with you, but I think I'm going to wait till the end of this, and then I can stop my share, reshare, and show them all to you at once. But one thing that we use that's been super helpful for a couple of years, many years now, like 5, is a project plan. And so this project plan documents the things that are organized and decided on before the semester begins, like, of course, contact information, but also expectations and desired outcomes. What do we want to see at the end of the semester, either in terms of the service we're providing to children, youth, or adults, or the capacity building? What is the hope for intended results from the community partner as a result of this product or the result of this service? And the roles of each person, of the faculty and community partner, like what role do they play in supporting the students? And at the end, we have a schedule. So this can be similar or same to the syllabus, but it only is about the CEL project. It only gives the deadlines, the benchmarks, the meeting dates, as much as is reasonable and feasible. So I will explain and show you an example of the template for that at the end. During virtual, it's really important to discuss those roles and expectations for communication so that you do have regular communication and follow-up, and including feedback meetings with the community partner is important. And then the third is power, creating opportunities for shared power. And so in the classroom, in terms of increased engagement, and I'm not going to focus a lot of this presentation on in the classroom dynamics, but as we know, many students have been really challenged from COVID and feel disempowered, feel off kilter. Their world has been shaken, feeling isolated. I'm thinking of freshmen in particular who come on campus, leaving their families for the first time, trying to adjust to college and having to wear a mask and social distance. And so I think it's important to find opportunities to empower students, to have them involved in the class experience, develop class norms, provide choices of assignments. And creating shared power with community partners. Like I said, part of the principles is really making sure we have shared balance of power. And then considering disparities, like was referenced in the questions, that some partners don't have access to technology. And so how can this work? We work with the families of the kids that receive the Seeds of Success program on resiliency. And some of the parents don't have access to cars. They do have access to computers, because those that didn't, the city school district was able to provide laptops to them, which I think was fantastic. But we also had a workbook that I created that had new activities that were more amenable to online, and then they were left at the school. Parents came to pick them up. We mailed those workbooks to parents that weren't able to come to the school to pick them up. We would not have been able to do the project, though, in its entirety without the computer access. So that was important to figure out. I'm going to give an example, another example of using technology in a bit. Integrating ways to get to know each other, establish those relationships, really support the engagement experience. It is going to feel differently. This feels differently than being in person in a workshop environment. And so being able to create assignments, icebreakers, ways to share is really important for creating that relationship. So just two examples here. We have understanding your audience. And so I think to be able to best meet the needs of that audience, of that partner, we need to know who they are, what their values are, what their mission, their goals. And so a student assignment could be case studies and agency analysis at the beginning of the semester. Again, it depends on the project, how much in depth the students really do need to know. Integrating interviews, and then an online asset mapping. So sometimes I have students go into the community, drive around and take note of the assets as well as the deficits. So is there a food desert community? Is there access to fresh fruits and vegetables? Is there access to food, period? Access to public transportation? So what are the deficits, but importantly, what are the assets and the strengths, the churches, the schools, the community centers? And so students understand the big picture. So that's one example to enhance that engagement piece and the partnership piece. And then the other piece, and again, I can show this to you at the end, is a Google Doc, shared Google Doc. So the students create notes and document what they do, what they plan to do, their reflections, all on this Google Doc that's shared with each other, shared with the professor, and shared with a community partner. Now, of course, some reflection assignments might not be appropriate to share with a community partner because it might be about the community partner. They might want to have students to feel free to share things they might find frustrating or concerning. But in this Google Doc case, students were planning for the SEEDS program and documenting the books and the activities and the questions they were going to use. So I knew what their plan was. The teacher could provide feedback and then a reflection on what worked well and what could be done differently the next time. And so that was okay for everybody to see. And by putting in comments, the students can add on, the teacher can add on that feedback, I can add on that feedback, and I did use it that way. By the way, I teach a course every year. That's a core course on social justice, poverty, and resiliency in children. Here's another example of what those things I'm talking about. So this is a partnership with Renew, Rochester Energy Efficiency and Weatherization, and they provide funding and support for homes to improve weatherization and efficiency of homes and health outcomes. And so the strengths identification happened in partnership with Renew. They filled out the survey. We had a meeting. We had several meetings to identify what were those gaps. And it wasn't as easy maybe as it sounds. Organizations don't always know what their needs are. We had to have several conversations to figure out kind of where they needed support with some research and some topics and what those would be used for in terms of grants and what the students would bring to that they could contribute. But we determined to have students develop a carbon offset. Well, Renew already has a carbon offset program, and they needed additional impact data. And she wanted the environmental economic students to research how other nonprofits can monetize carbon offsets and the impact of home energy initiatives. So that was the assignment. And we use a planning process like the project plan that captured what these outcomes were, the schedule, when and how to communicate, and a plan for that final deliverable to make sure everybody was on the same page. And then we shared power by having the students complete a case study. Research reports were shared through Google Doc. The partner looked at those, provided feedback mid-semester, then met with the students through Zoom, and then attended a Zoom meeting and provided feedback during that time too. And then the students made final revisions to the product and then delivered it to Renew, and she was thrilled. It was very well received. And then the last P is train for professionalism with technology. So this has definitely been a learning curve for all of us. And so students had to learn how to use Zoom, faculty, community partners. Again, there's maybe some other tools, but that was the main one that we all used. And so I orient students at the beginning of every semester. I orient by request, but I hit about 90% of the classes. And I included more information about professionalism online. So how should the students present themselves? And I'm sure we could all share stories of students who didn't present themselves as well as they should. But how should they dress? Should it be business casual? Should they be as they are, but not have a hoodie or a hat on their head? Should they be sitting in their bed or at their table in the kitchen or at their desk? How should the light be? They should always show their face unless there's a reason not to. And that's, I know, sensitive and tricky, but certainly in a small group meeting, they should treat it as if they were face to face, and certainly they wouldn't hide their face. Of course, it depends on what's, the reasons they might not want to do that. And then, of course, using the mute feature. If a community partner is presenting to the whole class, then that's a different scenario. Practice with the technology prior to the class session. And so I'll give you an example of that. and provide training on technology for individuals who haven't previously used it if needed, and have a backup plan in case the technology fails. So you can tape or archive sessions for later use if needed. So my example is, this is another direct service that we did this fall semester. Again, these pictures are from last year, not this year. So we worked with these seniors from Episcopal Senior Living Community. This was a Aging in the Life course. That's Dr. Marta Rodriguez in the lower right, talking to one of the residents. And this course was about aging and all the different issues around aging. And so these seniors attended half of the classes with the students and got readings in advance, read the readings. The students brought the discussion questions. They had a discussion, both contributing their perspectives. Of course, the seniors had lived experiences to share. The students documented a lot of these stories and then put them into a report and gave that report back to the resident. They said, though, the best part of the experience was the conversations during the experience, and learning and sharing with each others. They were matched through a speed dating kind of process. So of course, through Zoom, this is different. And so if I kind of go back to my slide here, so we had to first of all provide training for residents who hadn't used Zoom, and some didn't have the technology. And so fortunately, this long-term care home and home also for those who are retired, they had staff who were able to help residents. They also provided a room, social distance, where they provided a few laptops for residents to come and log into the Zoom. And we did a trial. We did an orientation for the residents using Zoom. That worked out nicely. What was even more tricky was we worked with a second partner. Community Place of Greater Rochester serves low-income residents. They have a senior center. So those residents were at home and low income, and many had never used Zoom or had technology. So they were able to provide a few laptops, or they were on their phones. And we actually had a training session. I led a training session with the staff on how to install Zoom on their devices, and then modeled how they would then call their seniors and train them on how to add Zoom to their devices and log in. We got everybody's email, which was necessary for breakout rooms for the professor. And then we had our orientation session. Then we got together with the students, 40 people in a room. So this was the ultimate challenge, using technology remotely, 40 people. And so I was co-host, I attended, and Dr. Rodriguez Galan, she had some challenges setting up the breakout rooms and making them stick and making them work. And so I would facilitate a discussion at the beginning to the whole group. And some of this was kind of impromptu, while she worked with the breakout rooms, sent everybody to breakout rooms. Students brought their discussion questions. Everybody had done the reading. They discussed, students took notes, brought everybody back, and then they had large group discussions. So, and then I had a mid-semester check-in with the seniors at their home, at the resident, and then brought that feedback back to the professor, and they had about 8 sessions. So it turned out to be successful. The students were all showing their face. They were instructed to be prepared and participate. Some of them were more conversational than others and more comfortable with than others. Right during the middle in October, the college closed because our COVID levels spiked. And so the students had to quickly transition to online. And so we had to spend some time actually talking about that, because the students were pretty stressed. Some of them lived in New York City and couldn't find a ride home. And so some of them didn't attend that one session during that week. But we included that as part of the conversation, just acknowledging where the students were at and how challenging that was for them and how stressful. We also spent some time acknowledging for the seniors how stressful at times it felt to use the technology that we're not used to. Like, where is the mute feature? And, why is my face not showing? And how do I do this? So just, we had to save some time for that. Okay, so this is a time that I think you would, I would like you to go into breakout rooms and see about applying this to your own practice. And so I'm not as, I of course don't know at this point who you all are and who's faculty, who's staff, what your experience level is, but you're going to be in a group. And Marisol, I think you'll need to assign them to groups because I don't.
This is a webinar, so we don't have the breakout group option in the webinar.
Oh, got it.
But I think the group is of a size that we could just have conversation because we've got 12 attendees at this point.
Okay. So would that be through the chat feature?
I think I can allow everyone to talk.
Yeah, that would be great. Because I can't.
You should have co-hosting.
Okay. Yeah, we can absolutely have a conversation. So I would like to use Jamboard. There's Padlet, there's Jamboard, there's Mentimeter, and I wasn't going to spend time instructing on those, but those are ways to also engage and use different tools. And so I know there's 4 different sessions in this webinar, and there's multiple references to student engagement in the classroom. So that's why I really wanted to focus on partnerships here. But Marisol, if you wanted to put this in the chat, this link here. And I also actually, I'm going to stop share for a moment, and I'm going to show you those documents that I had promised you.
I don't have access to put that in the chat because I don't have a copy of your slides. And
right, okay. Okay, so I'll figure that out in a moment. So the first thing I wanted to share can you see that? So this is a project plan. So this is a template. This is populated partly by myself during meetings. I take minutes, I facilitate the meetings. That's part of my job as we've set it up within the program. And then I send it to faculty and the community partner for them to fill out the rest. So it starts with a project description. Then we have a faculty section and a community partner section. So we have contact information, a course description, because often the partner wants to know what are the students going to learn, what's the course goals. We have some details here, which can be very helpful for when the courses will be offered, how many students, who they are, what are the academic outcomes and goals, and then the professor's role. And when I mean role, that means we have a promotion management class where students create marketing plans. The professor is very much responsible for teaching content related to SMART goals and demographics and competitors and those kinds of topics, which are the topics they integrate into their report relative to the needs of the client or partner. So the partner has a big role. The faculty have a big role. Philosophy of Education is another course where we have the students in optional project groups working in direct service in educational settings or seniors. And they do a variety of tasks, activities to be able to learn about education relative to educational philosophers. The majority of the oversight of that is on the community partner. If students are leading discussion group with seniors, if they're doing the SEEDS program, the professor is responsible for the reflection assignments and just for keeping tabs on the student, but they are not responsible for helping the students every step of the way once they go on site, if that makes sense. So it's very helpful to outline, these are the kind of work I'm going to do to support the students. For the community, we have a sort of a parallel question. What is your organization description? What are the community outcomes and the goals from this? And what are their roles going to be? And then a schedule at the end. And this, like I said, doesn't take the place of the syllabus, but it really outlines like this is the orientation day. This is the benchmark of the draft of the proposal, or these are the 6 weeks that students will be on site doing their work. Here's a feedback meeting in the middle. Here's the presentation at the end that you're invited to, community partner. Does anybody have any questions on this document? Okay, can you see this document?
There is one question. Ann Williams says, love the idea of promotional marketing class. Can you send along more information so I can start a conversation with our marketing faculty?
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely share my information. I'd be happy to talk to you more about that. Can you see the Seeds of Success Planning worksheet? Okay, so
Yes.
this is in Google Doc. You can see that. And this link is then shared, like I said, with the students in the class, with the professor, and with the community partner. This can be done, of course, lots of different ways, but I have a chart here. So the students meet in class in their teams, they make their choices about what book they're going to read, the discussion, the activities, and the evaluation of what worked well last time and what should be done differently the next time. And then I've put in comments here to give them feedback. And this can be done in real time. So, and you might have them fill this out in class. And so you can know what they accomplished. You can have them do this right after there's each session. But the teacher also can provide some comments.
Folks want to know, Lynn, if they would have access to these documents after the webinar?
I can send you the PowerPoint.
Sure. You can
and
send it
then,
out to anyone who registered.
Yeah, I'd be happy for, that's probably the simplest because then it's all in one place. My contact is there as well if you have follow-up questions. And then there we go. That was a survey. Yeah, so I might try to pull up the survey while you're doing your work here. So the Mentimeter, I mean this Jamboard. I'm just going to send you the link, Marisol.
Okay.
If that's okay. Post it. Okay. So in terms of the application, so what I'd like you to do is to think about your own work, and I'll give you a few minutes to kind of do this on your own, and then we can talk as a group. And so when we talk, it would be really helpful to know your role, if you're faculty, professor, or student, and if you are considering considering a community engaged learning, or you support faculty in developing community engaged learning, or you're a participant in community engaged learning. So the first question is preparation. So within your own work, how can you ascertain the strengths and needs of the community partner and or the strengths and needs of your students and you, and use them for successful outcomes? So recall that I shared a survey. I talked about conversations and debrief meetings you can have with a community partner. And then we do assess at the end the outcome for our students, faculty, and community partners. And I ask, What else do you need? And so, and then I also shared those qualities of strength qualities for working on collaboration with others and with the community. So the second is the process. Within your work, how can you use a project planning approach, project plan, MOU, for effective CEL, especially in an online environment? So you might have other ways of using kind of this project management approach other than a project plan, but could you see this working within your practice? The third is the power, share power. Within your work, how can you ensure you are sharing power between students and community partners? What assignments might be effective to accomplish this? So remember, I talked about sharing power, making sure that you're not doing to others, but you're working together in collaboration to meet a shared goal for mutual benefit. And that we talked about the asset mapping, Google Docs, and case studies as examples of assignments. And then the last is professionalism. Within your work, how can you use technology to its best advantage to strengthen partnerships and engagement? How can you help students be professional on that technology and show their best selves in that technology? So again, the 4 Ps is, I go back. So if you could take a moment and on the Jamboard, you can add, I don't know if you've ever used it before, but on the lower right-hand corner is a little circle with an X, and you just click on that. And then on the left-hand side, I think there's a pen or there's a notepad, and either one of those would work. A text box is provided as well, and you can just basically add your notes. So again, choose preparation, process, power, or professionalism, and just indicate where you think in your work these might be most beneficial. Just choose one. You don't have to do all 4. And then I will look myself at that Jamboard, and then we can talk about what you contributed and give you about 5 minutes. It's 4 o'clock, and then I'll open it up for questions. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up that survey from the beginning. So does anybody have any questions about the activity? Okay, I see 3 contributions on the Jamboard. Keep them coming. Give you about 2 more minutes. Okay, so I think we have 4 contributions. Feel free to continue to add. Let me make sure I'm sharing. Okay. So I think everybody could see that. So we have some comments about power, needing to mentor on all sides of the partnership and give up control and sharing power, especially with the students. So I think, that's a lot of the sort of disposition and kind of mindset that community engaged learning requires, even without virtual, is giving up a little bit of that control in the classroom. That you have content to teach, you have lectures, you have text, you have discussion questions in mind, but knowing that sometimes there's an ebb and flow. There's changes or developments in the community. There's ways to kind of address that in the classroom, or there's good learning that happens in the classroom that should be applied to the work in the community. And so there sort of is that sort of ebb and flow, and being able to kind of stretch those sort of flexibility muscles, and knowing that you can give up some of that stage to be able to put that learning and that experience in the center of the stage, I think is really key to creating that good balance of power. Addressing the green one here, how to do training with partners while being online. So I experienced that working with the seniors, and they were saying, what do I do? And somebody had their purse in front of the screen. It's like, nope, it's right there. You need to move your purse. And they said, well, how, they were talking and it was mute. They said, you need to unmute yourself. Like, where is that? And so they, had to point to, said, illustrate or guide them using their voice to where the unmute button is. And that seems simple when you've done it a long time, but is not simple if you've never done it before. And even just getting set up, we found, can be very complicated if you have different devices, Apple versus, PC, and then you have tablets versus desktop versus laptops versus your phone, and Zoom can show up in different ways. I sent a cheat sheet. I made a cheat sheet for Zoom and downloading and using, send it through email, and then we use the phone to work with the staff at Community Place to help them download and set up Zoom. That's not a skill I thought I would have to know or do in my job, but it definitely was something I had to adapt to. But it worked. We made it work. And then they did the same thing with their seniors, and everybody joined. And it was sort of amazing to see that happen. The professionalism. And so use that schedule to pre-plan some check-in meetings. Not everything can be pre-planned and you might not want to, but scheduling that orientation before the semester starts, scheduling that mid-semester check-in and the final presentation can be super helpful as the semester moves along quickly, and people fill up their schedules. And then, yeah, doing a practice run with a meeting with students, doing a practice run with a breakout room. That can be super helpful just to increase comfort level, like you mentioned here, but just to make sure it works. And then shared leadership. So yeah, students do get less engaged. I've on a discussion, I think Facebook group, and lots of examples, and I've seen it myself too, of students kind of checking out or not being engaged within their breakout rooms like you want them to or hope that they would. I have not seen that in the direct service experiences. I've heard of it more in terms of reflection, academic kind of reflection, but I have seen students be really engaged when working with the individuals, the children and the seniors. But I think showing faces, requiring that if possible, and giving them very clear tasks, not just have a conversation, but read this chapter, preview, discussion questions, have a curriculum of activities and books. I think the more there's sort of a scaffolding of a structure of what they need to do and some feedback, the more the students can focus on the dynamics and feel comfortable engaging with others, in an online environment. And I think the way people look into the screen matters too. And that can't always be controlled, but I'm on my laptop right now. And when I look at my face, I'm looking to the side, but my camera's right there. But I feel like I can, in meetings, have a conversation because I'm at eye level and I feel like I'm talking to somebody and they can talk to me. And we may not always make the same eye contact we would in person, but it's different than when I'm on my desktop because my camera's up here and it shows more of my body and it feels like it's always looking down and that I'm not really engaging with a person, that I'm just sort of there, I guess. It's hard to explain, but I think that even without realizing can create a different dynamic. So maybe I just open it up for additional questions. I think we lost some people.
Yeah, we did at the hour. Some people had to leave for other meetings.
Got it. Yeah. So let me share my screen.
I had a question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So this is Ann Williams, and I'm a faculty member at a community college in New Haven, Connecticut. And I've seen the technology issues aren't limited to the community partners, or our students have them all the time also. But also the idea of acknowledging stress and acknowledging the fact that everyone's in the same thing together. What strategies have you used to help the students and the community partners actually participate in that conversation of the stress of the moment?
Yeah, I think, faculty have mentioned how they just very simply say, how are you all doing? How are you doing? Like people say, fine. They're like, well, is that a social fine? Or is that like really fine? And you might not do that to a large group on the spot, but you might be able to do it in small groups or with individual students. But I think it makes a big difference when students feel like faculty just are acknowledging that things are hard for a lot of students, and or even just say, anybody want to share how their week went or how their day is going. I also think that you can, just in terms of the comfort engagement part, have set sort of interactive, I wouldn't call it icebreakers necessarily, but ways for students to feel comfortable with each other. And then in terms of the technology, I mean, we have we have, fortunately, and I think not all campuses have it, but we do have somebody who's hired to do lots of training sessions about how to use the different technology, and they offer it for students as well as faculty and staff. So that's been super helpful. But as a professor, I think some things you can, support the students, and other things that you might want to use your IT staff. Did that answer your question?
If I can add something, one of the things that we've been doing more lately is trying to kind of have those mindful minutes at the beginning. So thinking about, as folks are coming on, just working folks through a breathing exercise, thinking about like what it's taken them to get there, just so that they have sort of a minute to shift and settle and kind of breathe. And we've found that very helpful because people might not always be willing to share in broader groups, but sort of the permission to like sit and release and breathe and think about what it took for them to get there, acknowledging you're happy for their presence there,
Yeah,
and letting them be able to kind of sit with that has been a useful technique.
that's a great technique. And are you interested in seeing the full survey, or that's not so important at this point? I did find it.
Are there any other questions? You can just say them out loud since we're an intimate group right now. There's a question from Heather that says, in what ways are you supported as a faculty member at your institution? You mentioned training.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. In what ways are you supported as a faculty member at your institution? You mentioned training. What other ways have you felt supported?
It's a good question. So I feel, so I'm staff. I do teach one course as an adjunct. I provide training as a director of community engaged learning program, to the faculty that are involved in this process. I serve as a consultant as well. It's my job to help find community partners and to match them with interested faculty, and then to provide either formal training or one-on-one meetings to talk about their curriculum, about their syllabi, assignments, and how to work effectively with that community partner, how to engage students in the process. So I can cover the gamut of topics. We also have a person who supports the technology needs of faculty. And so using Blackboard and using Zoom and using all kinds of tools that's supported by the college, they provide workshops and one-on-one. So I've used them a lot. We started off, and just to make a long story really short, we started off with an idea. Our community engaged learning program was an idea from students, and we formed a committee of faculty and staff and these students. And we ended up writing for a couple grants. We received this federal grant, Learn to Serve America, from the Corporation for National Community Service when there was that grant. And slowly we got some data and slowly got institutional support, and then got full-time support from the college. And now community engagement is in our college's strategic plan, and we're serving as an anchor institution for our community, and formed an institute, which includes a couple other programs. So we've really grown in terms of support for this work. We could do more. We can always have more and do more, but we do provide stipends for faculty. We do provide a grant that students can write small for their project resources. We do have some funds for transportation. And now in our suite, we have some administrative support part-time. So a lot has changed in the last 10 years ago was about when this got started. I've been at the campus for 20 years. And we have a new teaching and learning center, which includes mostly technology, but we do have convocations and workshops for all faculty throughout the year. And there's been a lot of support during COVID for the needs of faculty, I think, and lots of campus conversations and opportunities for feedback and surveys and updates. And so I think I feel supported, and I feel like our needs have been listened to. And I'm grateful to be able to work from home, and there's weekly testing now for those that are on site, and everyone has gotten vaccinated. Even the staff are now able to get vaccinated who are on site. So I hope that addressed your question.
Any other questions at this time?
I do have the post-session survey.
Yes, I put a link for it in the chat as well.
Excellent.
So we encourage folks to fill that out and give us feedback, and we will send a follow-up email with the PowerPoint, and the recording of this webinar will be available on the Campus Compact website, and we'll include that link as well in the email that we send out. It should be, well, today's Friday, so probably sometime next week.
Did I answer the question at the beginning of the session? There's more I could talk about, so I'm happy to provide a few more explanations or details.
I think you did.
We have about 20 to 25 courses each semester, so we work with about 40 different community partners, and so we've had a big range of experiences. But I think by and large, using these practices, we've found to be able to use, we've found that we've still been able to have pretty good outcomes, even with the challenges that this year has brought. And I guess I'll end with saying that I think we've learned a lot that we can apply for next year. So our hope is that we can be on campus fully in September, that we will all be vaccinated, and that we can be back in the community. I think we'll have to wait and see what that's going to look like. And I'm sure that's the same across the country and around the world. We'll just have to wait and see. And so we want to be able to apply the principles of good practice, engaging with partners and students, but also this technology. Like I can see using Zoom for some second and third meetings instead of always going on site. I can see using Zoom in some courses where the majority of students are freshmen because they're not allowed to have cars on campus. I can see doing some more sort of online remote engagement where it makes sense for students. So I think we can borrow some of the good practices and just to make our program even stronger. I did see a question.
So the question is, do you think school administration in general values service learning in the promotion and tenure process?
Well, I'm a member of the New York, I'm a member of the Community of Practice for the National Campus Compact on faculty engagement, and we just talked about that today. So that's a really good question, and it's a tricky question. I feel very lucky that we have supportive president and provost, and are now in the strategic plan for growing community engaged learning and forming of an institute. We have deans across all our 5 schools who are very supportive of this, and it's integrated into the mission of their schools. We do not have a formal process in the tenure and promotion process. We have had some faculty who have done this work that have not been promoted. And so it's a challenging thing because faculty, if they don't feel that there's formal recognition for it, may turn away from it. And so the informal and even written into the college strategic plan means a lot, but when push comes to shove, if they don't get promoted, regardless of their work, then that word gets around too. So, we certainly have greater participation by fully tenured faculty, and even in those that are sort of brand new and are just kind of starting out and really enthusiastic about it. I think it's those that are coming up to tenure that feel like they need the time to do research that sometimes I get a pushback, but not always. I think there's ways to work with the deans and ways to integrate this into the dossier, and especially thinking of it in terms of scholarship, thinking of it in terms of your teaching. And we're also working at the faculty statutes of integrating some examples of how this qualifies as engaged scholarship, and adding that so that we can slowly sort of change the culture around that.
And Ryan says, I'm interested in following up about your professional development regarding how to be professional online. We have 35 undergrad staff in our civic engagement office, and that will fit well with our professional development goals. So we can talk a little bit more about the sort of professionalism piece.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the full question. You say you have 35 undergraduate staff, so undergraduate students?
Who are working at the center, it looks like.
Okay.
And he thinks that will work well with their professional development goals. So, but if you can talk a little bit more about the kind of professionalism piece, maybe if you've done it as part of training with students.
Oh, the professionalism online.
Yeah, I'm also interested, like, how do you manage around equity with that, given, there's a lot of debate online or currently about online professionalism, students showing cameras, the sensitivity for being in the home, the intrusion in the home environment from school and work.
Right. I think there's a gain and a loss either way. I do think that it's really important to be sensitive to people's home space, to be considerate to why some students might not want to show their cameras at a particular time. I think there's a huge difference in the engagement level, though, when you have cameras off and you're speaking to a row of black boxes. And so it's hard to know how to get around that. So I think if possible, and that's just always the way to phrase it, if possible, if students can sit in front of a wall with a laptop or their phone in their hand, to create privacy, if they can find a place in their home that's quiet. I think the encouragement is important because, thinking creatively in many ways of solving the problem, maybe there's spaces that they might not think of because they're not encouraged to. So I think it's a fine line. We're giving so much permission that students say, well, I don't ever have to. I can always say I don't want to, and allows them to kind of check out versus being in tune to the spaces the students might be in, and that it might be really important for them to be private. So I think that's important. But I think the professionalism piece, trying to talk about it. So this is an academic graded assignment, but it's also can be a work experience. And so, like I said, we toe that line. And so how would you show up to a work meeting? What about your eye contact? What about a smile? What about preparing questions in advance, knowing your assignment, listening well, and then reflecting back what you heard, asking intelligent questions. And so those kind of dynamics are challenging if you aren't showing your face. And so if possible, and you can, then also thinking about, just because you're in front of a computer doesn't mean that you don't have to still kind of push yourself to use some of those good interpersonal dynamics and those, the vocal and the nonverbal, good, professional communication, thinking about where you're sitting in the home, thinking about your dress and your attire. I mean, it's the same kind of thing that you would if you were to go on site to a meeting with a community partner. And then working with kids. I don't think you can do a direct service working with children, youth, or older adults and not show your face. I think it's just really hard and not really, I don't, in some ways, it's not respectful to the community because they are showing their home experiences. And you need to have that dynamic. Of course, there are things you can do over the phone. There are relationships you can form through internet, but I think it restricts that if you don't have some kind of that engagement. So those are all, I think, important criteria to talk about, and then get the students' input. Ask them, how do you feel about this? How do you feel kind of in terms of your confidence and your ability to connect in this situation versus that? What do you think is the best way to present yourself? Why wouldn't you want to? And kind of be where they're at and begin the conversation with their experiences, I think would honor where they're coming from in terms of your staff in your office. So a training can include that conversation. And then I do provide a PowerPoint training that's about 15 minutes that I talk about. Just for a little bit more information, I talk about what is community-engaged learning. I talk about the benefits. I give some results from our assessment. And then I talk about different kinds. And then I go into the sort of the professional piece, and I have about a 5-minute video I created that talks about some of the things I just talked about, but also talks about travel and a little bit about safety and a little bit about preparation and a little bit about positive attitude, a little bit about bias and kind of checking assumptions and going into it, knowing that you're going to learn from the experience. And so there's some tips around those topics that I think are important to give to students.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn, for your presentation today, and we're excited to share with our participants. Please fill out the survey. We would love to get your feedback and input. There's more webinars connected to Fusion to come, so please look on compact.org to sign up. And thank you all for attending. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for attending.